Hey everyone, Rigatoni Jack here, and boy do I have some stories for you today. Here's the thing about heroism, it's usually just stupidity wearing a fancy cape. And I should know, because I'm about to tell you about the time I tried to rescue someone who is absolutely 100% not in need of rescuing at all. You should probably know that I'm currently crashing on my sister's couch. It's one of those situations where life throws you a curveball, and instead of hitting it out of the park, you end up sleeping in your sister's living room and working at her lakeside bar. The couch is surprisingly comfortable though, so there's that. The lake I'm talking about? Lake Jocassee. And get this, there's an entire town down there, submerged and forgotten, like some kind of underwater suburbia. The scuba divers love it. The fish probably think it's weird. So, there I was, running around the lake one morning, because that's what you do when you're trying to avoid being the perpetual third wheel in your sister's love story. The sun was doing its whole morning thing, the birds were having their daily screaming contest, and I was just minding my own business when, bam, I saw it. A head, just floating there, 40 feet out in the water, not moving, like at all. Now, a normal person would have shouted something helpful like, "Hey, you alive out there?" But no, not me, because apparently I'd decided that this was my origin story, my superhero moment. Spoiler alert, it wasn't. Picture this, because I'm going to tell you anyway. There I am, stripping down to my sports bra and, I kid you not, dragonfly-covered underwear. Yes, dragonflies. Because nothing says professional lifeguard like cartoon insects on your butt. The water was exactly as cold as you'd expect lake water to be when you're about to make a complete fool of yourself. I hit those rocks like they were made of tiny knives. Did this weird hop, skip, flail thing that probably looked like a chicken having an existential crisis, and splashed into the water with all the grace of a drunk elephant. But here's where it gets good, or bad. Depends on your perspective, really. I'm swimming out there, right? Can't open my eyes because of my contacts, which is exactly the kind of detail they leave out of superhero movies. Nobody ever talks about Superman's contact lens problems. Finally, I get close enough to open my eyes, and there he is. This completely fine, totally not drowning scuba diver, looking at me like I'm some kind of lake cryptid that's just emerged from the depths. "Are you okay?" I ask, because apparently that's what you say when you're that one who looks like they need help. He takes out his regulator and says, "Yes." And let me tell you, I have never heard a question mark speak so loudly. That's when my brain does this thing where it just stops, like when your computer decides to update right in the middle of something important, except the important thing is your dignity. I try to escape, yelling over my shoulder about my failed rescue mission, only to find myself face to face with another diver who apparently materialized out of nowhere like some kind of aquatic ninja. And what do? I scream, not a cute little eek, but a full-on banshee whale that probably registered on seismographs. Then more divers pop up, because of course they do. Turns out I'd stumbled into some kind of military training exercise, which is exactly the kind of thing that happens when you're wearing dragonfly underwear. The best part? These weren't just any military guys. They were training for some elite underwater operations thing. And there I was, doggy paddling in my cartoon underwear, refusing help because apparently drowning was preferable to losing what was left of my dignity. But here's the thing about completely mortifying yourself in front of a group of military divers. Sometimes it works out, because that guy I tried to save, he showed up at the bar later. Turns out he has a thing for failed superheroes in dragonfly underwear. So maybe the moral of this story is that sometimes the best things in life start with making a complete fool of yourself. Or maybe it's that you should always wear decent underwear when going for a run. Or possibly that there's a fine line between heroism and idiocy, and I've never met a line I couldn't trip over. The truth is, I'm still seeing him, and every time someone asks how we met, I get to watch him try not to laugh while I explain that I tried to save his life while he was perfectly fine and fully certified to save himself. Life's funny like that. Sometimes you think you're about to have your superhero moment, and instead you end up with a story about how you met your boyfriend by attempting to rescue him from absolutely nothing while wearing dragonfly underwear. And you know what? I wouldn't have it any other way. Story 2. The ocean doesn't care about your confidence level. It doesn't care how many achievements you've unlocked in virtual worlds. And it definitely doesn't care about your questionable fashion choices involving denim. The ocean simply exists. And on that day, it almost made me stop existing. Let me tell you about myself. I'm 27 years old. Picture a vending machine with arms and legs. That's basically me. My daily exercise consists of walking to the office coffee maker. And swimming? Well, let's just say my experience was minimal and mostly theoretical. When my uncle and cousin invited me snorkeling, I should have said no. But there's this thing that happens when you're trying to prove yourself. Your mouth moves faster than your brain. Sure, I heard myself say. Time froze, space bent. The universe gave me one last chance to reconsider. I didn't take it. My cousin handed me his spare gear. I kept my jean shorts on because sometimes we make choices that future versions of ourselves will question forever. For 15 minutes, everything was underwater bliss. Fish swam their choreographed dances. The water held me like a secret. Then my uncle turned to me and said, "Let's ditch the life vests." Inside my head, I was screaming. But out loud, I just said, "Okay, here's something you should know. My uncle and cousin are practically marine life with human DNA. They've been swimming here since before they could walk. Meanwhile, my aquatic education consisted of not drowning at the YMCA when I was 12. We were 70 meters from shore. The water was 6 meters deep, and my chances of survival were rapidly decreasing. Everything happened in a blur. Water flooded my snorkel. Panic rose in my chest. I surfaced too quickly. The ocean slapped my face. I tried to yell, but the ocean interrupted, over and over and over again. Ahead of me, my relatives glided through water like they were part of it. Behind me, panic threw a party in my chest and invited all its friends. I turned around, started swimming. Then my legs betrayed me. Both calves cramped simultaneously, signing my death warrant in muscle spasms. But here's what they don't tell you about survival. It's not graceful. It's not pretty. It's just raw instinct wrapped in desperation. Somehow, adrenaline kicked in. Fear became fuel. Luck took pity, and 50 meters became 0. I reached shallow water. Later, I sat on the beach, building sandcastles like they were protection spells. My uncle and cousin finally noticed my absence. They found me trying to look casual while making silent promises to every deity in the phone book. I learned some important lessons that day. The ocean demands respect. Proper training matters. Jean shorts are never proper swim attire. And having fins helps. Who knew? Tonight I'm signing up for swim lessons. And a gym membership. And maybe therapy. Because here's the truth about near-death experiences. They change you. They make you humble. They make you careful. And sometimes they make you write about them while sitting safely on land, wearing proper shorts, planning your return to the water. Because there will be a return, just not in jeans, ever. Story 3. If you've ever tried to impress someone and it backfired spectacularly, drop an emoji in the comments. And while you're down there, make sure to hit that subscribe button. There are plenty more stories where this came from. Looking back now, I can tell you the exact moment I made the decision that almost ended my life. It wasn't when I lied about being a scuba diver, though that certainly set things in motion. It wasn't even when I agreed to go night diving with a stranger. No, it was that precise moment on the boat, looking at her face illuminated by moonlight, when I convinced myself I could somehow make this work. But I'm getting ahead of myself. Let me start 3 years ago, fresh out of university, when I decided to treat myself to a trip to Cuba. Here I was, a 20-something accountant from Montreal whose most exciting hobbies included Dungeons and Dragons and gardening, about to embark on what I thought would be a simple vacation with friends. The universe, with its infinite capacity for irony, had other plans. My flight was overbooked and I got moved to the back of the plane. That's where I met her. A professional photographer for a world-renowned magazine, who at just 23 had already captured images in rainforests and deserts across the globe. She was heading to Cuba to photograph marine life, and I, in what would prove to be a monumentally poor decision, told her I was a diver. "Oh, really?" she had asked, her eyes lighting up. "Where do you dive?" "Nova Scotia," I replied, thinking myself clever. After all, I did dive, just not the kind with oxygen tanks and pressure gauges and, actual certification. Later that night, after a few drinks with my friends, she messaged me about going night diving. And here's the thing about desire, it has this way of making terrible ideas seem perfectly reasonable. So When I met her at this place called Marielle, watching her slip into a wetsuit, I still thought I could pull this off. I didn't know then that scuba diving requires hours of training. I didn't know about proper weight calculations or emergency procedures or the countless other things that keep divers alive. All I knew was that she was beautiful, and I was in too deep, metaphorically at least. The literal deep part was coming. We took a small boat out into the darkness. The water below us was pitch black, like staring into an abyss that stared right back. She dropped a line and challenged me to race her to the bottom. Then she disappeared beneath the surface, leaving me alone with my rapidly deteriorating plan. The moment I hit the water, physics decided to remind me why pretending to be a certified diver was a terrible idea. I sank like a stone, panicked, and managed to dislodge my mask while trying to adjust a weight belt I didn't understand. Water rushed in, and suddenly the romantic evening I'd imagined transformed into a fight for survival. The next thing I knew, I was breaking the surface, coughing up seawater, and facing a justifiably furious woman holding a diving knife she'd just used to cut me free from my weights. In that moment, illuminated by the same moonlight that had seemed so romantic minutes before, she wasn't beautiful anymore. She was terrifying. "What the fuck was that?" she demanded, and I finally confessed my lie through water-logged coughs. She saved my life that night, then told me never to contact her again. I'd like to say I learned something profound about honesty or love or the dangers of trying to impress beautiful people. But really, I just learned that pretending to be a scuba diver is a particularly stupid way to try to get a date. Sometimes I think about her, probably still out there somewhere, taking amazing photographs and definitely not dating men who lie about their diving credentials. And I think about how close I came to becoming a very different kind of underwater photograph, the kind that shows up in safety training presentations about what not to do. So here's my advice. If you're trying to impress someone, stick to what you know. Because trust me, drowning is not the kind of getting wet anyone has in mind when they're hoping for a romantic evening. Story 4. Here's what you need to know about being an ICU nurse during a pandemic. It's exactly like being trapped in a science fiction movie, minus the cool special effects, plus an endless supply of awkward moments. I've been working in our hospital's COVID-19 ICU lately. And when I say working, I mean surviving in what feels like another dimension. We've converted the entire unit, plus the neighbouring floor, into what we call negative airflow rooms. Think of them as invisible shields keeping all those virus particles contained. For your average COVID patient, it's not too dramatic. Basic protection does the trick. But the ICU? That's a whole different universe. Most of my patients depend on ventilators to breathe. Picture each room as a tiny virus particle factory. Trust me, it's not the kind of tour you'd want to take. But here's where I lucked out. I got assigned a PAPR. Imagine strapping on an astronaut helmet connected to a belt-mounted machine by a long tube. The whole get-up makes me look ready for a Mars mission. This fancy contraption pumps filtered air into my hood, creating a safe bubble around my face. It's not completely sealed like diving gear. Instead, it constantly pulls in air through a special 3M filter. So there I was one day doing my regular nurse duties. Picture the scene, me in my spacesuit, my patient peacefully sedated, the room absolutely silent. That's when it hit me. You know that moment when your stomach reminds you that maybe, just maybe, that breakfast burrito wasn't your smartest choice. My brain made what I can only describe as an epically bad decision. The thought process went something like this. Nobody's around. Patient's asleep. I'm wearing this protective hood. What could possibly go wrong? Oh my goodness. Let me tell you about instant regret, the kind that hits you like a truck. Because what my brilliant mind failed to consider was the location of that air-sucking machine right behind me, right where I just released what can only be described as a silent but deadly assault on humanity. For 5 excruciating minutes, which felt more like 5 centuries, I stood frozen while my own personal brand of awful circulated through my hood like the world's most horrifying perfume sample. I couldn't escape. I was trapped in a bubble of my own creation, fighting the urge to gag while trying to maintain some semblance of professionalism. Here's my advice to anyone wearing a PAPR. Always, and I mean always, wear the machine in front. Consider this my public service announcement to future healthcare workers everywhere. Oh, and maybe skip those breakfast burritos during pandemic shifts. Just a friendly suggestion. Story 5. Let me just say that doing something completely ridiculous in the name of science wasn't exactly on my winter bucket list. But here's the thing about late night internet rabbit holes. They have this way of making the most absurd ideas sound totally reasonable. Picture this, me, standing by Blue Water Lake at 10 o'clock at night, wearing a borrowed wetsuit that fits about as well as my grandma's hand-me-down sweaters. And yes, I dragged my best friend into this mess, because apparently that's what best friends are for. Watching you make questionable life choices while holding the other end of a safety rope. The moon was doing that whole dramatic thing, you know? Like in movies where it's super bright and makes everything look both beautiful and slightly terrifying. Perfect ambience for what was about to become either the dumbest or most memorable night of my life. Spoiler alert, it was definitely both. Okay, equipment check, I said, trying to sound like I totally knew what I was doing. Fun fact, a 3-day diving course in California does not make you a diving expert. Who knew? The wetsuit was basically hanging off me like a garbage bag, except for the arms and legs, which were cutting off my circulation. Super cute. I'd love to say I gracefully entered the water like some kind of aquatic goddess, but reality check. I basically flopped in like a confused penguin. At first, it wasn't terrible. The wetsuit was doing its job, kind of. Then February in New Mexico decided to remind me that it was, in fact, still February in New Mexico. The moment some water snuck into my suit, I swear my soul left my body for a second. You know that feeling when you jump into a pool and your body goes, nope, multiply that by about 1,000. But here's the weird thing about determination. It makes you do really stupid things, even when every single cell in your body is screaming, get out of the water, you absolute walnut. So, there I was, floating in what felt like liquid nitrogen, pretending this was totally fine. Time gets super weird underwater. Like, seriously weird. I tried 3 times to complete my mission, don't ask. And 3 times my body was like, LOL, nope. On attempt number 4, something changed. Not in a good way, more in an oh crud, I can't breathe kind of way. The air from my tank went from normal to non-existent faster than my last crush went from maybe interested to dating someone else. Pro tip. When you're underwater and suddenly can't breathe, it's possibly the most terrifying thing ever. It's like expecting a full glass of water and getting an empty one. Except the empty glass is your lungs and you're, underwater. I yanked on that safety rope like my life depended on it, which, BTW, it totally did. The next thing I remember is waking up in my friend's car, which was definitely an upgrade from not waking up at all. Then came the ER, where they apparently combat hypothermia with an endless supply of hot chocolate and these energy bars that taste like someone tried to make cardboard edible by dumping sugar on it. The doctors kept asking questions and I kept giving vague answers while trying to regain feeling in body parts I'd started to think were gone forever. Hours later, while waiting for my toes to remember they were supposed to be part of my body, I had some time to think. Sometimes curiosity leads you down weird paths. Sometimes those paths lead straight to the ER, where you have to explain to very professional medical staff that you are practicing night diving, while trying not to make eye contact. The good news, I survived. Everything eventually went back to normal, though my pride might take a bit longer to recover. And Blue Water Lake, well, I'm pretty sure it's still there, probably wondering what kind of sleep-deprived teenager thought this was a good idea. P.S. In case you're wondering, yes, everything did eventually thaw out. And no, I'm not telling you what I was looking for. Some mysteries are better left unsolved, especially when they involve hypothermia and questionable decision-making skills. Story 6. Nobody tells you the real truth about travelling abroad. Not the glossy magazines, not those perfectly filtered Instagram posts. No, they don't mention that travel is basically a cosmic joke wrapped in Murphy's Law, served with a side of chaos. I need to tell you what happened to me in Africa. I'd been there for exactly 4 days and 7 hours when my body decided to rebel. And when I say rebel, I mean my digestive system staged its own French Revolution. My stomach wasn't just upset, it was writing manifestos and building barricades. Those 4 days stretched out like an eternity. I spent them staring at hotel room walls until they started talking back to me. My bed became both my closest companion and my worst enemy. Water and crackers were all I could manage, topped with a healthy portion of regret. Then came day 5. On day 5, my clearly malfunctioning brain made what I now recognize as the worst decision ever made by anyone anywhere. I went to the beach. Yes, you heard that correctly. I went to the beach. I guess I thought the universe owed me something good. Spoiler alert, it didn't. Here's what happens when you challenge fate while your body is still in revolution mode. First, you find what seems like the perfect spot on the beach. Next, you carefully spread out your towel. For a brief moment, you start feeling almost normal again. Then your body sends you the signal. Now, the signal isn't your typical warning sign. It's not a gentle nudge or a polite suggestion. Picture every single cell in your body screaming in unison, "Evacuate! Evacuate! This is not a drill." I did what any reasonable person would do. I sprinted to the bathroom at the beachfront bar, but there it was, the sign that crushed all hope, closed for repairs. The universe wasn't just chuckling at this point, it was rolling around on the ground, pointing and howling with laughter. The bartender, his face forever etched in my memory, suggested I use the ocean. He said it so casually, like he was recommending the catch of the day. And that's how I found myself swimming out into the Indian Ocean, feeling like the world's most reluctant aquanaut. I was trying to put as much distance as possible between myself and every other human being on that beach. But wait, because of course this story isn't over. Just when I thought I'd found the perfect spot in this vast blue sanctuary, 4 scuba divers emerged from the depths like some kind of judgment-bearing merpeople. Their eyes grew huge behind their masks, and they swam away faster than politicians dodging tough questions. I had created an underwater situation that no marine biology course could have prepared them for. My return journey to the hotel wasn't so much a walk as it was a shuffle of shame. My thoughts kept circling around one phrase, what just happened? But here's what I've learned about real travel, not the picture-perfect version we see in brochures. It's not about those flawless Instagram moments. It's about those times that make you question every single life choice that brought you to this point. It's about the stories that make your friends back away slowly while asking, "You did what?" Because when it comes down to it, we're all just humans trying to navigate this crazy world without completely embarrassing ourselves. Sometimes we fail spectacularly at that goal. And you know what? That's perfectly fine. Just remember one piece of advice: when nature calls, stay far away from scuba diving spots. Speaking of unexpected underwater encounters, let me know in the comments about your wildest animal encounter. Story 7. The thing about sharks is that they're actually quite beautiful when you're not thinking about all the ways they could kill you. But I guess that's true of most dangerous things in life. They're captivating right up until the moment you realize you've accidentally put one into a state of tonic immobility, which is a real thing that happened to me. And I should probably start at the beginning. Here's what you need to know. I was terrified of sharks. Not in the casual, everyone's scared of sharks way, but in the I've spent months in therapy working through this specific fear way. And yet there I was on a boat off the coast, about to go scuba diving with them. Because sometimes the only way past fear is through it, even if through it means literally swimming through shark-infested waters. The first part was actually kind of magical. The water was this impossible shade of blue that painters probably spend their whole lives trying to capture, and schools of fish swirled around us like underwater confetti. When the first shark appeared, my heart did this thing where it simultaneously tried to stop and beat faster, which is physically impossible but emotionally accurate. And then something amazing happened. I touched it, just reached out and patted its back as it glided past, like it was some kind of aquatic Labrador. Not a great white, these were smaller, less aggressive sharks. But still, I touched a shark and lived to tell about it. I was feeling pretty good about myself right up until one of them decided to charge straight at me. Here's what they tell you about sharks charging at you. Grab their nose and redirect them. Simple, right? Except when you're actually in that moment with hundreds of pounds of predator swimming towards you, simple becomes a very relative term. I reached out, grabbed its nose, which feels nothing like you'd expect, by the way, and then, well, I panicked. Instead of gently redirecting it, I accidentally flipped it upside down. The shark just stopped, completely still, like someone had hit pause on an underwater documentary. For a moment, I considered petting its belly, but then remembered that some marine mammals have been known to respond to that kind of attention in ways that would make this story significantly less family friendly. So I decided against it. At the time, I thought this was just another weird shark fact to add to my growing collection. But then my friend told me something that turned this story from funny diving accident to possible accidental shark manslaughter. Apparently, when sharks are flipped upside down, they enter a state called tonic immobility. If they stay that way too long, they can die. So now I'm left wondering if somewhere out there, there's a shark heaven, and in it, there's a shark telling its shark friends about the time some panicky human with questionable diving skills accidentally turned it belly up. And I guess that's the thing about facing your fears. Sometimes you overcome them, and sometimes you accidentally flip them upside down and have to live with the consequences. The irony isn't lost on me that in trying to get over my fear of sharks, I might have given a shark a permanent reason to fear humans. Life is funny that way, except when it isn't funny at all. Story 8. Okay, so here's something you absolutely need to know about being 18 in 1998. Having a bowl cut was basically the worst thing ever. Like, we're talking complete and total social disaster territory. I'm Chris, by the way. Hi. And I'm about to tell you the completely true story of how I managed to lose my wallet in the actual Pacific Ocean and somehow got it back 2 years later. I know, right? Before the whole Hawaii thing happened, my life was pretty much what you'd expect from your average teenage boy. I spent most of my time hanging out with my two best friends, Ryan and Dave. We weren't exactly what you'd call adventurous. Mostly I focused on pretending my hair didn't look like someone had literally placed a bowl on my head and cut around the edges. Plot twist, it absolutely did look exactly like that. So, Ryan's dad was this airline pilot, which mostly just meant Ryan had these super cool airplane-shaped erasers and endless stories about different airports. But then one day, he dropped this absolute bombshell on us. You guys, Dad's taking us all to Hawaii. Hawaii, freaking Hawaii. And when I say us all, I mean all of us. Me, complete with my tragic bowl cut. Dave, who thought no one knew about his secret Pokemon card collection. Spoiler alert, we all knew. And Ryan, whose family was so incredibly religious, they literally said grace before taking their daily vitamins. Here's the thing about Hawaii that nobody tells you, it's basically nothing like suburban America. For starters, literally everyone drives convertible Mustangs. I'm not even exaggerating. Ryan's dad made his first major mistake when he gave us our own hotel room. His second mistake, not realizing that 3 18-year-old boys with zero supervision would absolutely, definitely become best friends with the first sketchy guy they met in a stairwell. For the record, his name was Cal. Yes, he bought us beer. No, it did not end well. This is where everything gets seriously wild. We found this flyer for a booze cruise. It was happening on a Sunday. Ryan had to go to church. Dave and I, we made some choices. Ryan, if you're listening to this, we're still kind of sorry. Kind of. Picture this scene. One extremely awkward teenager, that's me, who had basically never even seen alcohol before. One boat absolutely packed with beautiful people. One Long Island iced tea, which Dave and I split because we were classy like that. And one spectacularly terrible decision. The boat anchored somewhere in the middle of the ocean, and people started jumping off the back to swim to this floating trampoline thing. Normal people jumped from the actual designated jumping spot like reasonable human beings. But me, oh no, I had to be extra. I decided to climb up the side of the boat while wearing all my clothes, with my wallet still in my pocket. Fun fact, wallets don't float. At all. Less fun fact, getting home without any ID in 1998 was way easier than it probably should have been. Fast forward 2 whole years and my mum gets this random manila envelope from Colorado. Inside, my wallet, completely packed with sand, water, damaged ID still somehow visible, and what used to be a $20 bill, but now looked more like some kind of modern art experiment. But wait, there was also a letter from a Navy Reserve scuba instructor who found my wallet in 90 feet of water, miles from the shore. His wife actually tracked me down and mailed it back to me. Like, how amazing is that? Sometimes I take out that sandy wallet and just stare at it. It's like this weird little time capsule from some alternate universe where teenagers with bowl cuts actually have adventures and lose their wallets in oceans and somehow, miraculously, get them back. Ryan still loves bringing it up at parties. Hey Chris, remember that time you lost your wallet in the actual Pacific Ocean while I was at church? Yes, Ryan, yes, I absolutely do remember that. At least I eventually got rid of that bowl cut. Story 9. You know those summer evenings that start out completely normal and then somehow spiral into absolute chaos? The kind that make you question whether you're living in reality or some bizarre sitcom. Well, let me tell you about last night. The lake was painted in sunset colours when I told my family to head up to dinner without me. My wife Catherine gave me that look, the one that says, "Are you sure?" before loading our kids and my in-laws into our little white golf cart. I waved them off, promising I'd be right behind them once I secured the pontoon. I was wrestling with the boat cover, my fingers fumbling with the snaps when I heard it, splashing. Not the gentle lapping of waves against the dock, but the desperate kind that makes your stomach drop. Across the cove, a woman was struggling in the water. My heart started racing before my brain could catch up. People were shouting from the opposite shore, their voices carried away by the evening breeze. "Do you need help?" I called out, my voice echoing across the water. Her response came back breathless. "Yes!" I grabbed my phone, hitting Catherine's number with trembling fingers. "Hey, come back down to the dock. Someone's in trouble. I'm going in." I didn't wait for her response. The life jacket was in my hands before I could second guess myself. I snatched a throw cushion from the boat and dove into rescue mode, literally. The water was warm from the summer sun as I swam toward her. But just as I reached her with the cushion, she hit me with words I never expected to hear in this situation. "I'm topless." Time seemed to freeze for a moment. Two thoughts crashed into each other in my brain. My friends are never going to believe this, and how on earth am I going to explain this to Catherine? Okay, I managed, trying to keep my voice steady. "But are you all right?" She was gasping for air, her words coming in bursts. "My boyfriend, he's messed up. I had to get away." She kept asking if we could touch bottom. We couldn't. By the time we reached the dock, Catherine was waiting. God bless my wife. When our mysterious swimmer immediately announced her state of undress, Catherine's only concern was for her safety. The woman pulled on a white t-shirt she'd been carrying, water dripping down her arms. Then, without warning, she bolted. The next part happened so fast it felt like a movie. A pontoon boat appeared, cutting through the water at full speed. For a heart-stopping moment, I thought it was the angry boyfriend she'd mentioned. But no, it was two sheriff's deputies who'd commandeered someone's boat. And our mysterious swimmer? She jumped into our golf cart and disappeared into the gathering darkness. Here's the kicker. There was no angry boyfriend. The woman was apparently wanted for a string of burglaries, and I'd just become an unwitting accomplice in her escape. The deputies lost her in the night, caught up once, lost her again. We spent the next day searching for our golf cart, filing insurance claims, and checking social media until someone spotted it behind a house in the neighbouring community. The cart came back unharmed. The topless burglar, still at large, with a few more warrants to her name. And me? I'm left wondering if I should add accidental getaway driver provider to my resume. At least I've got a story to tell at parties, though I'm still not sure anyone's going to believe it. Story 10. Okay, so here's the thing about almost dying. It really makes you think about life's most ridiculous moments. And trust me, nothing gets more ridiculous than what happened to me last Saturday morning. I should probably introduce myself before I dive into this mortifying story. I'm Marcus, and I work for this company that tears down old buildings and stuff. Pretty normal job, right? Well, it was, until the incident trademark. You know how people say their life flashed before their eyes during near-death experiences? Mine didn't exactly flash, it more like slowly sank. Into sewage, ancient sewage to be specific. But I'm getting ahead of myself. So picture this, we're working on demolishing this super old waste treatment facility from the 1970s. We're talking vintage gross, like your grandparents' toilet memories preserved for all eternity. The main chamber was this massive 16-foot deep pit filled with, well, you can guess what it was filled with. The weirdest part, there were like 1 million pumpkin seeds in there. Side note, I now have questions about people's snacking habits in the 70s that will haunt me forever. Everything was fine until it rained, like biblically rained. My boss, let's call him Steve because that's his actual name and he owes me for this trauma. Asked me to check on the pumps. Simple enough task, right? Wrong. Here's where I made what I now call life-altering mistake number 1. I didn't put on any safety gear. Because why would I need safety gear just to look at some pumps? Spoiler alert, you always need safety gear. Then came life-altering mistake number 2. My phone rang while I was balanced on this tiny concrete ledge above the pit of eternal grossness. And yes, I tried to answer it, because apparently my survival instincts were on vacation that day. You know, in movies, when everything goes into slow motion? That's exactly what happened, except instead of gracefully diving away from danger, I gracefully face-planted into 40 years of preserved sewage. At first, I was just disgusted. Then I started sinking. Actually sinking. Like quicksand, except so much worse. When you're slowly sinking into ancient sewage, your mind goes to some weird places. First you think, this is not happening. Then you realize, oh wait, this is happening. Then you think about how your mum is going to be so mad. And finally, you can't believe you might actually die reading vintage condom wrappers. By the time this stuff reached my chest, I was having a full-on existential crisis. The headline would read, local teen, okay, I'm 23, but whatever, discovers new way to die, you won't believe what happened next. But then, plot twist, I saw it. A piece of metal sticking out of the wall. A rusty piece of hope in a sea of... Yeah, you get it. Let me tell you something. When you're about to die in sewage, you discover superhuman strength you never knew you had. I stretched like I was trying out for the Olympic gymnastics team and grabbed that metal bar like my life depended on it. Because, you know, it did. The drive home was interesting, to say least. Picture this, me, wrapped in a garbage bag, contemplating every life choice that led to this moment. Fun times. So, what did I learn from all this? Maybe it was to always wear safety gear. Maybe it was to never answer your phone while working. Or maybe the real lesson is that life has a way of humbling you when you least expect it. Also, I now have a pathological fear of pumpkin seeds. Story 11. Quick intermission. If you're enjoying these aquatic disasters, make sure to subscribe for more stories collections just like this one. I post new videos every week, and trust me, these stories only get wilder. Here's something they don't tell you when you get into automotive development. Everything costs as much as a house, like a really nice house in a really nice neighborhood. And I just drove one of those house price cars into what was basically a swimming pool. Maybe I should start at the beginning. It was dark, the kind of dark that makes everything feel wrong, like you're in a horror movie and don't know it yet. Rain was coming down in sheets, turning the crummy back road behind the new housing development into something that looked like polished obsidian. My co-worker Jake and I were doing our usual test route, the one we'd driven approximately 1 million times before. No big deal, until we saw it. That's a lot of water, I said, staring at the massive puddle stretching across the entire road. Jake unbuckled his seatbelt. We should check it out. So we did what any responsible engineers would do. We got out and stared at it like we knew what we were looking at. The water seemed shallow enough. Just a little splash, right? Spoiler alert, wrong. So wrong. The second we drove in, I knew we'd messed up. The engine made this awful gurgling sound, like someone trying to drink a milkshake through a broken straw. And then everything went dark. No lights, no power steering, no brakes. Let me say that again. Slower, no. Brakes. I yanked the emergency brake, but by then we were already floating. Actually floating like a really expensive boat that was never ever meant to be a boat. Jake, sweet, optimistic Jake, jumped out to push. The water was up to his knees. We managed to push the car just enough to get the engine compartment out of the deeper water, but everything electrical was completely dead. So there I sat, on the side of the road, updating my mental resume and wondering if drowned $1 million car would look better or worse than seeking new opportunities on LinkedIn. Update #1. You know what's weird? Sometimes the internet actually makes you feel better. The company mechanic is checking it out on Monday because, of course, this happened on a weekend. I've got time to practice my please don't fire me speech in the mirror. Update #2. Plot twist. I still have a job. The car won't start. Shocking, I know. But our mechanic thinks it's fixable. Just some water in places where water should definitely not be. The best part, our incident report actually led to them changing the night driving policy. Turns out, documenting everything with photos and writing a detailed report makes you look responsible instead of completely incompetent. Sometimes the worst Monday ever turns into a surprisingly okay Tuesday. Who knew? Story 12. I never thought a spider would change my life. Like, seriously, spiders were firmly in my nope category, right up there with roller coasters and Brussels sprouts. But here I am, about to tell you how one tiny striped spider turned my whole world upside down. It started last Tuesday. My 7-year-old son, Max, and I were in the backyard when we saw it. The coolest spider ever. Not one of those creepy basement spiders that give you nightmares. This was a zebra jumping spider, decked out in black and white stripes like it was heading to a tiny arachnid fashion show. "Mom," Max whispered, his eyes huge, "it's doing a dance." And it was. This spider, let's call it Ziggy, was literally the LeBron James of jumping spiders. You should have seen its moves. It bounced around like it had springs for legs, showing off its stripes like, yeah, I know I'm fabulous. Obviously, we had to catch it. I mean, wouldn't you? We set up this whole spider paradise in a clear container. Max even decorated it with little twigs and leaves, like some microscopic version of Extreme Makeover Spider Edition. For 3 amazing days, we were totally spider scientists. We learned that Ziggy was super picky about food. Flies? Meh. Moths? Whatever. But baby grasshoppers? Oh my gosh, you should have seen the happy dance. It was like watching a tiny striped food critic review their favourite restaurant. Then came that day. You know how sometimes the smallest decisions end up being the biggest ones? The weather was brutal. Like, melt your face off hot. So I brought Ziggy inside. That's when my brain did that thing where it asks the worst possible question at the worst possible time. When was the last time Ziggy had water? I grabbed one of those little medicine cups, the kind you use for kids' Tylenol, added just a tiny bit of water. Seriously, it was barely enough to make a puddle. But here's the thing about life. Sometimes the tiniest puddles can cause the biggest waves. I found Ziggy later that day, and, well, let's just say our tiny striped friend had taken its final bow. Max cried. I cried. We had a funeral in the garden, complete with a popsicle stick cross and everything. Because that's what you do when your heart breaks, even if it breaks over something small enough to fit on your fingertip. You know what's weird? Sometimes the biggest lessons come in the smallest packages. Like how trying to help can sometimes hurt, or how love doesn't care about size, it just is. Or maybe how growing up means learning that even the smallest choices matter. Max still talks about Ziggy. He'll point to the stars sometimes and say, "Mum, maybe Ziggy's up there doing spider dances in space." And honestly, I kind of love that idea, because maybe that's what life is really about. Not the big dramatic moments, but the tiny ones. The spider-sized ones that somehow end up meaning everything. Story 13. I learned something interesting about almost dying. Your body knows exactly what's happening. Your brain? Not so much. It's too busy being an overconfident idiot. This whole thing went down last summer at Black Sandy Beach. I decided, because I was clearly a genius, to attempt this massive swim across the lake. Picture 1/2 mile of water stretched out in front of you, like when someone dares you to do something stupid and you say, "Challenge accepted." Whatever. I'd done this swim before, plus I'd prepared like a champion athlete, chugged a 5-hour energy and did some fancy breathing exercises. In my mind, I was basically Michael Phelps. The lake looked perfect that day. Classic summer scene. The sun blazed overhead and the water felt as warm as a bath. Near the shore, this thick green algae floated around like nature's grossest carpet. Once I pushed through that mess and hit clear water, I found my rhythm. I watched the beach get smaller and smaller behind me with each stroke. Then my ego took over. Instead of turning around at the opposite shore like any reasonable person, I decided to channel my inner explorer and swim south. Sometimes I'd roll onto my back, letting the sunshine warm my face. That's when I spotted them, 2 deer standing by the water. Naturally, I wondered how close they'd let me get. Suddenly, this strange scent hit me. It reminded me of bitter almonds. It's funny how your body can sense danger while your brain ignores all the warning signs. The algae around me had transformed into something from a sci-fi movie, glowing an eerie blue-green colour. My instinct screamed, "Get out!" But my brain said, "This is fine." The swim back was horrible. Some people in kayaks stopped to check on me, but I gave them my best everything's totally normal smile. It probably looked more like a pain grimace. Then exhaustion hit me like a truck. Near the shore, underwater plants wrapped around my legs. Both calves cramped up at once. It should have been agony. Instead, I felt amazing. Here's the weird thing about dying. Sometimes it feels fantastic. My brain threw a party while my body staged a revolt. When my feet touched the bottom, I felt euphoric, even though my muscles were in full rebellion. People shouted from the shore, but their voices sounded muffled, like they were speaking through water. Reality started to warp. The trees swayed to silent music. Was I frightened? No. Should I have been? Absolutely. But oxygen deprivation turns your brain into that friend who insists everything's fine while disaster unfolds around them. My next brilliant move? I drove home. Took a shower that felt freezing despite the visible steam. Stared at my blue lips in the mirror like they belonged to someone else. When I finally Googled my symptoms and read cyanide poisoning from blue-green algae, I made the most ridiculous choice possible. I went to Panda Express. Seriously, who chooses Chinese takeout over emergency medical care? Answer: someone whose oxygen-starved brain has surrendered control to their stomach. But here's the twist that saved me. That 5-hour energy drink contained B12, specifically cyanocobalamin, which helps treat cyanide poisoning. And all that heavy breathing during my swim? Accidental oxygen therapy? I survived because the universe has a weird sense of humor and terrible timing. The moral of this story? Sometimes the dumbest decisions keep you alive, but maybe don't count on that working twice. Story 14. I almost died yesterday. No exaggeration, just straight up nearly drowned. The kind of near-death experience that makes you appreciate every breath you take afterward. Here's what happened. It started as one of those perfect summer days. My buddies and I had been shredding trails at the bike park for hours. You know that feeling when your muscles are burning but you're grinning like an idiot? That was us. On the drive home, someone suggested we cool off at this lake we knew. There's this killer cliff jumping spot we'd hit dozens of times before, but something was different yesterday. The lake, which usually sits there like polished glass, had transformed into this angry beast. The wind was whipping across the water, creating these monster waves. From up on our 35-foot perch, they looked manageable, maybe 4 or 5 feet high. Man, were we wrong. We had this brilliant plan. Jump in, swim to this calm little bay around the corner. Simple, right? We were all strong swimmers. We'd done this a million times before. What could go wrong? Everything could go wrong. I went last. My friends jumped, whooped about how great the water felt. Then I took the plunge. The moment I hit the water, I knew we'd made a terrible mistake. First off, I swallowed enough lake water to fill half my lungs. Not ideal. After hacking it up, I tried to get my bearings. That's when reality hit me like a freight train. Those manageable waves, they were more like 8 to 10 feet high, and swimming against them, it was like trying to run up a down escalator made of liquid concrete. I'd swim and get absolutely nowhere. I'll never forget looking back at my friends. The pure terror on their faces told me everything I needed to know. We were in serious trouble. I tried to stay calm, tried to time my swimming with the waves. But every time I'd get my head above water, another wave would crash over me, forcing more water into my lungs. It was like trying to breathe while someone repeatedly dumps buckets of water on your face. That's when I made the call. "Abort the bay!" I screamed. "Climb the rocks!" The cliff face became our only option, even though the waves were absolutely hammering it. I managed to grab onto a rock, thinking I could time the waves and climb between them. Bad move. A massive 12-footer hit me like a liquid sledgehammer, ripping me off that rock and sending me spiraling to the lake bottom. Down there in the murky darkness, that's when the thought hit me. Is this how I die? Is this really how my story ends? But somehow, through pure adrenaline and desperation, I made it back to those rocks. This time I climbed like my life depended on it, because it did. Made it up 6 feet before the next wave could grab me. We all made it out eventually, scraped up and bleeding, but alive. My foot was swollen and bruised from some underwater rock, but I've never been happier to feel pain. Pain meant I was still breathing. Today feels strange, like I'm seeing everything through new eyes. Keep replaying those moments in my head, thinking about how close I came to becoming another drowning statistic. Let me tell you something. Nature demands respect. Those waves taught me that lesson the hard way, but I'm here to tell the tale, and that's what matters. Sometimes the best lessons in life are the ones that nearly kill you. Story 15. Looking back, I should have known better. That's what everyone says when things go wrong, right? But seriously, I should have known. Jake and I had been dating for almost 2 years and everything was perfect. Like, actually perfect. We were both experienced in relationships, knew how to communicate, and always respected each other's boundaries. We had our system down pat, safe words, check-ins, the whole 9 yards. But I got greedy. That's the thing about having something good. Sometimes you want to push it further, see how far the elastic will stretch before it snaps. So a few weeks ago, I suggested we try something new. A role-play scenario where we'd act out a dark fantasy. Jake wasn't into it at first, which I totally get. He's the sweetest guy I've ever dated, and the idea of pretending to be aggressive made him uncomfortable. It's just pretend, I told him, like acting in a movie. Looking back, I wish I'd dropped it right then. But Jake, being Jake, wanted to make me happy. So we planned it all out. Every detail, every boundary, every signal that would mean stop. We chose midnight as our starting point because apparently I've watched too many thriller movies. I won't go into the specifics, but things got intense, really intense. Jake stayed in character the whole time, which was what I wanted, but, well, let's just say I ended up with some bruises. Nothing major, the kind that come from accidentally bumping into furniture, but still visible. Afterward, we cuddled for an hour while I assured him everything was fine, but I could feel him pulling away, retreating into himself. He asked for space and I gave it to him. The next morning, everything changed. Jake took one look at my bruises and practically crumbled. "I can't believe I did that," he whispered, his voice cracking. That's not who I am." I tried everything to help him understand. "It was just pretend," I kept saying. We were both consenting adults playing make-believe. But here's the thing about crossing certain lines. Sometimes you can't uncross them. It's been 5 days now. 5 days of watching my wonderful, caring boyfriend withdraw into himself. We tried being intimate yesterday, but when I winced because he accidentally touched a tender spot, he completely shut down. "I can't," he said, looking devastated. "Every time I touch you, I remember being that person. I can't do it." So here I am, lying in bed at 3 a.m, writing this all down because I can't sleep. I messed up really bad, all because I couldn't let go of some fantasy I'd been carrying around for years. And now I might lose the best person I've ever been with because he can't reconcile the role he played with the person he really is. They say you don't know what you've got until it's gone. But sometimes you know exactly what you've got. You just don't realize how easily you can break it. And there you have it, folks. 15 stories that prove water and humans don't always mix. From accidental rescues to underwater mishaps, I hope these tales made you laugh, cringe, and maybe think twice about your next water adventure. If you enjoyed this collection, you know what to do. Smash that like button, hit subscribe, and don't forget to ring that notification bell so you don't miss my next video. Drop a comment below telling me which story was your favourite. This is Rigatoni Jack signing off. And remember, always check if someone actually needs rescuing before diving in.